day here. And first here, I wanted to introduce the team. So we are about 8 institutions in the Permafrost Discovery Gateway. It's funded by the Navigating the Arctic initiative, started in November, and it's a 4-year project. We got Kenton McHenry and Ayman Soliman from University of Illinois, who do the cyber infrastructure part, implementing Clouder into the Permafrost Discovery Gateway. Matt Jones and Amber Budden are at the Arctic Data Center, and that's going to be the home of the Discovery Gateway. Jason Cervenek is at Ohio State University, and he's developed the Fluid Earth Viewer, which we are making part of the Permafrost Discovery Gateway. And Sean DeVitarana is a remote sensing expert at the University of Connecticut. He does deep learning and works with the PGC imagery here. And then we got Guido Gross sitting, Marnitz at Alfred Wegener Institute, a remote sensing permafrost expert, and Ben Jones and Jennifer Moss, University of Alaska Fairbanks. Ben is providing expertise in permafrost and remote sensing, and Jennifer is our outreach person to the K-12 and high school user community. Michael Brubaker, he's with Alaska Pacific University and also Alaska Native Tribal Health Consortium, and he's contributing with the LEO network, which is our pathway to the Arctic community, people living in the Arctic. And also Galina Bind at NASA, she's contributing with geospatial atmospheric products from NASA. So that are sort of tailored a little bit special to us. So, and we have our website here. So the Permafrost Discovery Gateway is aimed for discovery and knowledge generation of big permafrost imagery. And we all know that Arctic is changing rapidly due to permafrost thaw, and I feel it's changing so much that we have a hard time keeping up with it. And we also know that people in the Arctic here are literally living the change, and the LEO network is a great resource to tap into the lives of people in the north. Same time, we have the data universe is expanding, and more data is being generated. And this is a global data, not just Arctic data, but it's literally expanding non-linearly. So we have more data that we know what to do with. And that's where we need machines to help us keep up with the new data, and therefore also the rapidly changing Arctic. And that's where I envision creating this Arctic data sphere where we can discover and experience data, and that would be the Permafrost Discovery Gateway. So here we have Permafrost Discovery Gateway is to make permafrost big imagery products discoverable for knowledge generation. So we have the satellites taking new imagery constantly and combine that with big computers. Then we can map coastal erosion, thaw slumps, and other permafrost thaw phenomena, and stick it into the Permafrost Discovery Gateway, which you will be able to access through your regular web browser, and then interact and combine these different data sets and visualize them and plot them. And the mission here is to make the big imagery products discoverable, both for the scientists primarily, and also the public. That's our secondary user for now. And the objectives is to support the development of pan-Arctic big imagery products, both by Shandi and Ingmar creating big imagery products, but also to help people who have created their own remote sensing code that works locally, and they're ready to apply pan-Arctic. And also another objective is to enable exploration and discovery by researchers and the public through interactive maps and graphing tools, and also through simple coding. People who have that interest to write their own simple code to access and analyze the big data sets. And the end goal is truly to empower diverse people to generate new knowledge and ideas. So why is the Permafrost Discovery Gateway needed? One is to shorten the pipeline from information to knowledge to action, because currently that is like a 10-year process. So here, from getting an idea to collecting the data and analyze it, publish it, and then maybe someone writing about it in a newspaper. So here the public can get another faster access to the information, while still have the old-fashioned way of receiving it. And also to monitor the change at spatial resolutions and coverage that's relevant to the people living in the Arctic and working in the Arctic. And therefore also bridge the spatial gap between field measurements and Pan-Arctic modeling studies, which are kind of on the extremes with sub-meter to tens of kilometer scales. And make these big data sets accessible to people, and also scale these remote sensing applications, code that work locally, applied to the Pan-Arctic. And in the end, then enable science and enable informed decisions. So one example of big data is the PGC data set, which is over 2 petabytes of imagery collected over the years and archived at PDC at University of Minnesota. And currently the Arctic DM is the only existing derived product from this imagery. And so, but we want to enable more of these Pan-Arctic products in the Permafrost Discovery Gateway and also make them accessible. And here's an example where Sean DeVitarana and Ehsan Bian at University of Connecticut are mapping ice wedge polygons. They've been using Exceed resources, but now are moving into Longhorn at TTech in Texas, the bigger computer. And here you see their results. For the no slope. I'm coming. What's wrong? Okay, Jerry Brown, you're not on mute. You need to mute yourself. Good to see that you're here and joining us. Then we also have Ingmar Nitze, who's mapping Thaw, slumps and lake change and fire using machine learning on Google Earth Engine. And he already published, a paper on regions in the Arctic, but he's here doing it Pan-Arctic as well. And here's an example of how it would look when you will enter the Permafrost Discovery Gateway through your web browser. We are building up on 3 existing graphing tools. And one is the Fluid Earth viewer in the background. I'll talk a little bit more about in the next slide. And then they have the imagery viewer there on the top right, which would be either S3 imagery or Google Earth imagery as a base map, and then map of ice wedge polygons that are delineated, or thaw slumps, etc. So you can fly in and out and explore and let your mind wander. And the third tool is from the Gapminder Foundation. It's a plotting tool that will be informed by these big data sets. So you can plot cumulative summer warmth, for example, on the x-axis, an area affected by ice wedge degradation on the y-axis, and then each dot represent a domain or a region. And me being a hydrologist, I like to divide it up into watersheds, and then the size of each point can be the absolute area affected by ice wedge degradation. And then you can make this plot move over time, so you get a little movie out of the graph in the end. So the idea is that you could literally create your graph here for your presentation or your paper. And the graph is informed by these big data sets in the background. So here's the Fluid Earth viewer. You can go and find it now and play around with it. It has atmospherics data, coarser data. And here we want to then stick in some of the permafrost products. And it will be second level permafrost products, because you won't be able to zoom in and look at individual polygons here, but instead you will have, let's say, a count of new lakes or new thaw slumps here, and you can combine it with anomalies, a map of temperature anomalies, for example, for a certain period, and zoom in and zoom out. So it's this, I think, will be probably the first portion of the Permafrost Discovery Gateway that we will release, because we will have a sort of a stepwise release of different parts of the gateway as they're finished, because we want feedback from the community to make sure it's becoming effective. And that's the one thing I'm interested in from you guys here today. What do you want to have on your Permafrost Discovery Gateway smorgasbord? What data sets are geospatial data sets would you like to see included to make it useful for you? And it doesn't have to be Pan-Arctic data sets, it could be regional ones. And I have a long list of them here. I'm gonna just run through them real quick. You can see examples. Jerry Brown's permafrost map, new permafrost map from Norway, the Arctic DM, the Circumpolar Arctic Vegetation map from Skip and Martha in Fairbanks, soil organic carbon from Gustav Hugelius, global surface waters, watershed boundaries, lakes, global lake coverage database, very coarse resolution, but it exists, so why not stick it in there? And rivers, same thing. Ingmar's already existing mapped out thaw slumps in selected regions across the Arctic. We got Sebastian's permafrost projections, and same thing with climate projections from the IPCC. Stick them in there, and glaciers, as well as sea ice maps, because sea ice is relevant for if you combine it with a data set of coastal erosion, for example. So here is a write-up of all those data sets I went through, and in the chat box, there's a link to a Google Doc. And if you think of some other data sets that we can include, put them down there, write a comment, put it down. We already got some great ideas from the presentation early this morning. And I'll leave it at that and see if anyone has any questions or thoughts. I'd love some feedback. And we'll have more of these webinars in the future. This one was focusing more on the what geospatial data sets to include, but we will have more of them in the future. Get feedback from the community, because that's the only way we can make it effective and useful, is to get feedback from the users as we develop this Permafrost Discovery Gateway.
Thanks, Anna. That was really nice overview of the Permafrost Discovery Gateway. Seems like there's a lot of possibilities there for including disparate data sets in one place. Anybody have any questions or comments or data sets that should be included?
Can I ask one?
Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, I was just wondering how, two things. How are you going to also use the peer review process in making sure there's a peer review process for things? I'm just thinking about a process where someone has a paper, they have a data set, they want to get it, has to be online to get the paper published. So some journals are keeping these data, but will the data be replicated here at this site and also at, say, the NSF Arctic database? I mean, have you thought about that process?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so that's exactly one of the reasons why I wanted to work with the Arctic Data Center, and why they are one of the PIs on the Permafrost Discovery Gateway, is the Arctic Data Center is currently the place where Arctic researchers funded by NSF have to archive their data. So the Permafrost Discovery Gateway is in a way an extension of the Arctic Data Center, because it enables the Arctic Data Center to receive, not just archive big data sets, but make it discoverable and accessible. And I think it takes the traditional data archival to the next step, the whole new level, where we're not just making it into a library, we're also making it into a place where people can actually create science as they enter this portal. So the Arctic Data Center have a good tradition of doing DUIs and tracking data. And that's something we want to, that's something, for example, I feel Google Earth Engine is not capturing, is this transparency of how data is generated, and also tracking how the data was created, and also to keep track of who created the data. So there's a credit given to people who built the code and created the data sets. So that's the whole reason why it is with Arctic Data Center, is to check off those things.
Okay, thanks for that clarification.
Yeah.
Hi Anna, this is Zelchin. Really nice talk. I learned things that I didn't know, and it's great to see that you are leading this initiative, or one of those who lead this initiative. I'm not clear on the discovery gateway that you described. Is it the part of Arctic data, or it's a separate sort of entity and separate website?
It's hosted on the Arctic Data Center, their cyber infrastructure. But it will be, I think, as you communicate with Arctic Data Center, it will be different phases you can communicate with. So who knows how it will evolve in the future, but currently it has its own web address, and it's sort of growing up on the side, but it's still linking into the existing Arctic Data Center cyber infrastructure. My vision, because I know you have a 5-year plan, my vision is that, you know, when people apply for money to NSF and they want to do field work and they feel they need support to do field work effectively in the Arctic, they contact the Polar Field Services because they know where to find the good charters and have the good camping equipment and so on. They make it easier. They're enabling science by helping people be comfortable in the field. And I envision that there would be a logistics support for cyber infrastructure as well. So if someone has an idea, big idea, I want to do big imagery product. I know the science, the earth science behind it. I have developed this code that works locally, but I'm clueless when it comes to make it operational at big scale, because it's a computer scientist experience. And I also want to be able to have my colleagues work with the data, and they don't have big computers, or they don't have coding experience, or they might have a little bit of coding experience. So the application for cyber infrastructure support happens at that very first level when people write a proposal. And that's a separate budget that kind of gets tagged along. Versus cyber infrastructure logistics and field logistics are kind of looked at separately. And the cyber infrastructure logistics is tagged on a little bit at the end. Like, you have to write a separate proposal to accede to receive high performance computing resources. So I wanted to see more equalizing happening there, and appreciation that let earth scientists focusing on what they're good for, and have cyber infrastructure logistics support and enable those ideas to happen. So I went on your question, Elshin, but
yeah, but I also was wondering, so you showed a bunch of great data sets, how I can access them. I mean, the access will go through Arctic data, or there's a separate entity, like, Discovery Gateway that I can access to that data?
Yeah, for now it's a separate gateway, but it will also be accessible through the Arctic Data Center as it is right now. See the Permafrost Discovery Gateway, you can explore the data just visually. That's one level. But the other way is too, that you could go there and you want to download certain parts of these big data sets and work it on your own computer, just like the current Arctic Data Center works, and another data repositories, that you take a chunk of the data, put it on your own computer, and you work on it there. The gateway will allow support both ways, because we appreciate that some data sets are just too huge to put on your own computer. And there's also not everyone that have the skills to really make use of this data. And I think to move science forward, we need to allow many different people to be able to work with the data, and that requires different way of accessing it and working with it. So see it as one home. It will all be there at the Arctic Data Center, and some of it makes sense to access through the old existing pathways. Others make more sense to work with the ones that we're developing here now through the gateway.
So,
No, go ahead.
okay. So Anna, this is Howie. So we see. So the gateway is essentially, it can be maybe seen as sort of a user-friendly or an interface to some of the larger data sets that exist currently in the Arctic Data Center.
Right.
Would there be capacity to So are these data, are the accessible data sets the ones that are already sort of regional or circumpolar scale or collectively, or will there be some capacity to generate big data sets from smaller data sets that already exist in the Arctic Data Center?
Yeah.
Yeah.
No, I think I should also point out that not all data sets sits in the Arctic Data Center. See it as a user interface. That's good. I like that, Howie. It's a user interface that's linking into different resources. Like the Arctic DM is stored on the Google Earth engine archive. So we will work through that channel. Instead of moving all the data into one place, it's kind of pulling in data from different resources, and you can access it through this one gateway. What was the second question you had? Kind of
Pulling data sets together that maybe are not together yet.
Yeah, exactly. So that's another thing, you know, each data set gets so much more valuable if you can combine it with other data sets. And if one data set is only covering a small portion of Alaska and another one Pan-Arctic, you can combine it and look at the region that you're interested in. So that is really the power of it, is each data set is more and more valuable if you add another data set to it. So I envision, you know, that we're used to working with Arctic Data Center to submit our data, and that will continue. It's just that we're building the capacity of the Arctic Data Center to handle these big data sets, and also not just see it as a place where you park the data on the shelf and let it sit there, but you're actually enjoying it and get to experience it even without having the technical skills of writing the code. Or if you do have some technical skills writing the code, that you can write the code there through this interface, and instead of having to download all the big data on your computer, which you still can do if you want to.
Great, thank you.
And I see that Stephen or Stefan has a question, or he has his hand raised.
Yeah, thanks. I thought this was easier in a big crowd. Thank you, Anna. This is phenomenal to see. I'm wondering how far you are keeping in touch with people like PolarView, who are developing the Polar Thematic Exploration Platform, which in some ways is a similar initiative. And if, you know, there is something like a community of practice emerging that keeps these big data initiatives permeable with each other.
Mm-hmm.
I'm posting the link actually to this in the chat now.
Thank you, Stefan, because I have not worked with them. I don't know if Matt Jones, maybe you might be familiar with them, but I have not connected with those people. So that would be, yeah, it would be really interesting to see what they're doing. And I should mention here too, in addition to visualization of the data, the Permafrost Discovery Gateway is also there to help people optimize their code so that it can be applied to the Pan-Arctic. So that's another kind of level or layer to it. So enable the creation of new big geospatial data sets.
Thanks.
Thank you, Stefan. That's cool. I need to check it out.
Any other questions or comments before we move on?
Hi, this is Liz Hoy with NASA. I work on Above, and we have a lot of data sets in Above that might be, some of them that might be useful for this effort. Some are about surface layer, change in active layer, and others about fire disturbance. And I'll put some of them in the Google Sheet that you've got. I don't know if there's a way that you can link to the NASA DAX too, like you have with the NSF data center, but that might be something to think about.
Yes, I really thank you for bringing it up. And you know, NASA Above and NASA Effort is definitely on the list of connecting with you guys a bit more and linking it up, because yeah, I agree that there's great potential there, and that would be fantastic. We have Galina Vin as one of our NASA connection, but so we're in there, but definitely something we want to work on more and more. So it's great. Please write it down and add your name to there as well, so we have your connection.
Great, sounds good, thanks.
Awesome.
Hey, Anna, this is John Pierce. Just real quick, too, you mentioned Leo Network at the beginning of your presentation. I was just curious how that fits in, if you wouldn't mind elaborate on that a bit.
Yeah, we're still kind of, thinking about how we can do it and with the money that we have. And I would like ultimately, like in the future, my vision is that you have people, both the machines keeping track of changes happening, and at the same time you have people observing and living in the Arctic changes happening, and you would merge those two information sources or information creators and create science that way. Right now, I think what we'll do is that in the Permafrost Discovery Gateway user interface, that we will have the Leo network as one of the components, exactly how the Leo network is. I hope we can do some kind of linkage, some technical linkage of the two. Right now we're kind of unclear of what we can do, but we're exploring that. So I would love to see the observation that the Leo network is doing put together with these big data sets from Ingmar and Shandi of Thaw slumps, and so the two complement each other and really amplify the value of each. But exactly how that's going to happen, yeah, we're still kind of exploring. So if you have any thoughts on that, yeah, we're really curious to hear.
Okay, thanks.
Anyone else have any comments? If not, we might move on to John Pierce's little intro and talk about the IARPC 5-year plan and the permafrost place within that. So with that, I'll.
All right, so can everyone see the slide deck there?
Yes.
Yep.
There we go. All right, well, thanks very much for letting me join your meeting today. So my name is John Pierce. I'm with USGS Alaska Science Center in Anchorage. I'm also a co-lead for the Coastal Resilience IARPC collaboration team. And I'm also on the planning steering committee for developing the next Arctic research plan. And so I just wanted to give a slide deck that Meredith put together that talks about the plan and kind of where we are at this point and how we are really looking for your input and the input of everyone else to sort of make this next plan something that we can all understand and work with going forward. So just real quickly, for anyone who's not completely familiar with IARPC, this slide sort of talks about what IARPC is, that it is a federal government committee, but it is open to everyone to log in and join sort of this broad platform, and particularly the website and these meetings, to find ways to collaborate about moving things forward that we all feel are important in the Arctic. And so there's a list there of many of the different people that are involved in IARPC, and then those different bubbles on the right are the different collaboration teams that are part of the current plan that we're working with. And so this is all, these teams are what's under discussion and will be under discussion going forward in terms of how we want to organize the next Arctic research plan. At this point, nothing's been written except maybe this first page of the next Arctic research plan, which will start in FY22. So really, I just want to, one of the biggest things I want to let you all know is that really nothing has been written yet. We are waiting for feedback and input from everyone on how people feel about the current plan, what new structures we might want to have in the next plan, and what people think are really critical issues facing the Arctic that this plan should address. And I'll go into more detail on all of that right now. But first, some basic facts about the current plan. So one of the things the plan does and that the next plan will also need to do is align with the goal and missions of federal agencies because it is a federal document. And it's written by US federal employees, but certainly with a ton of input from non-federal people and agencies and organizations is really key. So these research plans focus on research that'll be enhanced by cooperation among all the different federal agencies. It doesn't address everything that's taking place in the Arctic, but certainly tries to focus on, as I mentioned, the big critical things that we identify through this gathering and information input process. The plans to date have mostly focused on basic research, but there's a lot of applied as well, and that's sort of maybe emerging as a new focus for the next plan is more applied research. But we're open to ideas on all of that also. And then we welcome ideas for research in any natural or social sciences field. So this is kind of a timeline of what has to happen in terms of requirements for the next plan. And so right now we're in sort of the first two blocks on the left-hand side of the screen. The first processes of sort of approval to work have all been done. We've developed some basic engagement strategy at this point, and there's regular meetings that are happening right now to understand what we need to do to engage the public, engage residents and communities across the state of Alaska and the Arctic, and to receive input for developing the next plan. There's also a planning development steering group that's been formed and that has already met a few times, and those meetings will continue. There is the first Federal Register notice has been released, and that's open until August 2nd. And I'll go over kind of some of the main things that have been requested as part of that Federal Register request for information. We were hoping to hold public workshops to gather input across the state of Alaska, but as you all know, because of the pandemic, that's not going to happen. So we're working out other strategies to make that work, and I can answer questions on that at the end of the talk. And then after that, after we get some input, we will be having workshops to start drafting, sort of based on what we feel are the priorities that we've heard from people. And then there will be a lot of drafting of the, sort of the real fine print in terms of what is underneath all those priorities and how we're going to sort of move forward with maybe new teams and new groups to proceed with getting some of that work done on the top priorities that we see. And then the final block there kind of shows the timeline for releasing the final plan and going from there. So currently the Federal Register notice is soliciting input on these two bullets. We're asking for information from people on what they think of the content of the current plan and how the next plan should be formatted or organized, and what should be in the plan. And then also just the general organization. What do people think of the current structure of the current plan, and should we use a similar structure, or should we have something different for the best way to communicate those needs and work that's going to take place based on what's in that plan. There are a lot of opportunities to contribute, and there's a website on the ARPIC page that lists all these different opportunities, and maybe Meredith can show that once this talk is over. I think I just have one more slide after this. So for example, as I mentioned, there's the Federal Register notice. There's an email where you can submit ideas, also ask questions. Roberto Delgado's online on this meeting, and so he's available to answer questions. There is an online form on the IARPIC page where you can submit ideas. There's a Facebook page. As I mentioned, we're holding webinars such as this, and there's many others that will be announcing the formulation of the new plan and soliciting input. We're also working with communities to try to understand what strategic plans they already have that we could be looking at and getting presentations on, to understand what they've prioritized for their regions and their communities, so that we can make sure to include those ideas in the next plan. And then, as I said, there's a website that's containing all this information, and this is constantly being updated. And I think Meredith can show us that page here at the end of this talk. And then lastly, we'll just say that the Plan Development Director is Nikush Carlo, and her email is here. So if you have ideas that you want to share with her, please do so. And then certainly Meredith and Sarah with the IARPIC Secretariat are available too if you have questions or comments. So maybe Meredith, we can just share that page if that's okay with you.
Yep. Yeah, I'm pulling it up now.
And there's like an online form where you can register to receive a monthly newsletter that we're going to have out. So this is the page here. And if you go all the way to the bottom, there's an online form here where you can sign up for a newsletter that we'll be releasing on a monthly basis to let people know where we are in the process. And then all these opportunities for input that I mentioned in my slide are all here. And it mentions kind of the upcoming meetings for the different collaboration teams where we'll present the same information again and discuss questions that people have. I think somewhere down below, there's also a timeline of everything that's happened thus far. And mostly that's just been meetings to let people know of the request for input. So that documents all those different meetings where we've gone to different communities and different meetings and said, hey, we want your input on the next plan, and here's ways to do that. So I think that's all I have, but Roberto's on the phone, and so is Meredith and Sarah, so I'll let them chime in if they want to add any details that I might have missed. And if not, then yeah, we'd like to open up to questions, anything we can clarify or provide for folks based on all this.
Well, this is Elchin at Los Alamos National Lab. I was wondering, can you please summarize with 3 bullet points on the from the Arctic Research Plan?
So summarize what the Arctic Research Plan is in 3 bullet points?
Yes, thank you.
So Sarah or Meredith, do you want to answer that question?
I'm happy to take a crack at it. I'm not going to count this off, but I'll try to keep it short. It's required by law that the federal agencies come together to produce a 5-year research plan, which will enhance communication, coordination, and collaboration between the federal funding agencies who support research in the Arctic. Pretty good there, John, Roberto, Meredith?
Yep.
Yep, I like that summary.
The current plan, I will say the current plan, one of the goals of that plan is in the permafrost theme, and that's why this permafrost team is here to implement that part of the plan. That current plan will end at the end of December 2021.
Do you have a chapter in the plan devoted to cyber infrastructure, AI, big data? Because I think there's great opportunities, since this is bringing the federal agencies together to really enable more collaboration and of the science. So do you have a specific chapter aimed at that, or?
Roberto, you want to take that?
Not currently.
Not currently. Let's make one.
So yeah, I think that's great to provide that input. I think the other thing to keep in mind is that some of the research plan can not necessarily be aspirational, but needs to be sort of within what is already committed among the federal interagency to work on. And so it would be key to identify some of those agencies that are supporting relevant work in polar cyber infrastructure, or Arctic cyber infrastructure, and to have these types of discussions to develop, contribute what types of goals or objectives that we can put into or in a draft of the plan that would make sense. So yeah, I think a meeting like this, where you are gathering like-minded individuals who see a need and potentially a gap in the current plan and the overall sort of Arctic research investments, this is a good way to start in having that discussion. And I don't know, John gave a nice overview, sort of what the timeline is. There is an intent to hold a plan development workshop later on in the year. Still debating whether that will be in person or only online or some combination depending on what happens with the pandemic, of course. But that can certainly be an area of discussion during that planning phase workshop.
Yeah, that would be great, because I together with NCSA, Emma Solomon and Kenton McHenry, we've been communicating with Kevin. He is at the Office of Advanced Cyber Infrastructure. Kevin, I forgot his last name, for one of your colleagues. And he was really, he was supportive of us putting in a workshop proposal really on this topic, focusing more on the automatization of the workflows and also needs and gaps in the data archiving domains, and the fact that there's multiple agencies, federal agencies, that have their way of doing things, and it would be good to find connection and to kind of bring that data together and enable big data science. So I think maybe there's a good timing there with our workshop and this effort. So we could funnel, the ideas that's coming out of that workshop, and then you guys can figure out what makes sense to put into this particular plan that you're working on.
That sounds like a worthwhile idea. Yeah, to continue pursuing.
Cool. Great.
So any other questions we could address or any comments that folks have?
Were there any gaps or holes that people noticed in the previous 5-year plan in terms of permafrost research that they would like to see moving forward, perhaps? Or things they really liked about the previous 5-year plan?
And I'm going to go ahead and just drop in the chat box a link to the performance elements and research goals that make up the permafrost collaboration team, or that part of the plan, so that everyone can think about that maybe in more detail and consider how those elements have been useful, or, like Miriam said, what's missing or what is working.
Yeah, and another thing I'll share is a comment that came up on a meeting yesterday was sort of how best to share progress being made on some of the goals that are in the current plan and also in the future plan. So do people feel like they hear what progress is being made on these performance elements? Those are posted sort of voluntarily on the IRPIC webpage, and then those get consolidated into a newsletter that we all receive as being members of IRPIC. But if there's other ways that people would like to learn how progress is being made on permafrost work or other work, that's also really useful information to receive from you.
And I would just point out, particularly for this team, because I think it is relevant, is that the plan that we're currently implementing is the second comprehensive 5-year plan that we've been working under. And the first 5-year plan did not include a permafrost element. It just wasn't in there. And it was hearing from the permafrost community that that was a shortfall in the first plan that made the difference in the second plan to go ahead and add it. And so goals can drop off or be added, and the structure of the plan probably will change somewhat going into the next round. So I do think it's important for your voice to be heard and your thoughts and comments to be included in any of the formats that John indicated are available to you to comment.
Yeah, I think it's the comment on my side, the Selchin, Los Alamos National Lab. I'm working on the NG Arctic project, and one of the grand challenges that NG have been working for quite a while now is that how we can transition from fine scale, basically like looking at the ice wedge polygonal tundra, to a global scale to 100 by 100 resolution. So that's kind of a hard question to tackle. And what Anna talked about today, having this infrastructure available, and then, you know, figuring out how we can go from the different scale maps, how we can utilize them, and how we can then do some sort of maybe statistical extrapolation to a global scale. Because at the end, all what we're interested in is we want to do some sort of meaningful predictions that have less uncertainty. And therefore, you know, addressing these questions of the scalability between fine scale to global scale become important, because if we, the only way at this point to do the predictions is to run this global climate or global terrestrial models. And if those models don't represent these fine processes, and if we don't understand how to transition from fine scale to global scale so that we're not losing a lot of physics, that's kind of a hard question. And building towards that and addressing that in a plan, I think that would be nice. I don't know in which form that comes into the plan, but I think it would be great to have it, or at least to start thinking about that.
Yeah, Nelson, I'll just say, you know, I think that's totally doable, and I think that's something that you should propose. I think it'll get captured here, but you should propose for the next plan for the permafrost topic. I will say that sort of resolution theme is in the current plan in different places. I think different groups have recognized the need for either fine scale information or synthesizing information at a very broad scale, you know, across the plan in different places. So I'm sure that same sort of theme of resolution and integration or diving down into very specific needs for answers will be in the next plan, you know, for different groups. But yeah, I would encourage you to enter that someplace, you know, so that we have it for definitely for the permafrost topic in the next plan.
And how exactly to add that or to send that proposal to the plan?
So I think, oh, go ahead, Meredith.
Well, just so that everyone knows, I'm taking notes right now, and Miriam and Christina, as the team leaders, will also kind of summarize the general takeaways from today, and those will be included in the comments that we have generated. If you would like to submit an official comment to the Federal Register, you can do that through the link that I'm putting in the chat again, but just so you know that we're not weighting comments that come in through the Federal Register more heavily necessarily than comments coming in during sessions like this. Or that you can also submit a comment to Roberto through email is another way to do it, or there's an online form there along with a couple other different ways to submit comments.
Great, thank you.
Well, Miriam, I don't think I have much else to present on that. Elchin, thanks a lot for your question. I'm going to ask maybe that we add to our presentation a 3-bullet slide that just says, you know, here are the main points that we're trying to get across about the next plan. I think that was a great question. So we'll add that to our slide deck. So thanks for that question.
Can I make a comment? I forgot one thing. So if we, for the Permafrost Discovery Gateway, before we release something out in the for the public, we want to have a friendly group of people who can give feedback on like the very first version before we release it to the public. So if anyone is interested to be one of those testers, shoot me an email or put a comment there on the Google Doc, the link you can find on top of the chat window, and write your name down there on the Google Docs. So then it would be fantastic. So then we have many different levels of getting feedback and making sure we take care of the big ones before we release it to the public.
Yeah, thanks, Anna, for that feedback, and thanks also for your presentation. It looks like a really great interface for synthesizing data sets. And thank you, John, for presenting on the 5-year plan and for feedback from the group. And yes, you can keep providing feedback. It's, you know, you can go through the link that Meredith provided in the chat to look at the current performance elements and see if there's anything missing or that you would like to see added or changed to better represent the kind of permafrost research that's done. And I guess unless there's anything else from the group, we will end the call. Thanks again for joining, everyone.